Hello and welcome to the Haiku Pea Podcast, Series 5, Episode 6. I'm Patricia and my goodness have I got a lot of super original haiku for you today. First of all, I'd like to read you the poems that our YouTube editor Linda Ludwig chose from February's prompt. But 3 things to remind you of here. The first, to subscribe to our YouTube channel because there's more and more free content on there for you to enjoy at your leisure. Second, have you gone there and written your haiku or senryu in the prompt for March, which Marilyn Ward very kindly sent us? If you don't write your poem, it can't be featured, and it won't be in the journal. And last, but definitely not least, did you watch Stanford M. Forrester's presentation on Kerouac? My goodness, it really had a lot of little golden nuggets in it, not least of which was his thought on 575 haiku. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you haven't listened, and you're really missing out on a treat. Do share it with anyone else who might be interested in Kerouac. Speaking of treats, in this episode, I'll be reading your colour haiku and senryu, and of course I'm joined by the lovely Karen Harvey, Diana Salusia, and Matt Snyder as my community judges. They were fabulous. I really enjoyed working with them on this. I hope you enjoy what they have to say, even if you don't agree with them. One last reminder. This month, March 2022, is Haibun month. You have a few days to get your Haibun to me so that M. Shane Pruitt and I can read them and let you know whether your work has been accepted for the journal. Check out the submissions pages for the details. Link, of course, in the show notes. So let's start with Linda's choices from February's Poetry Pea video prompt on YouTube. There were, of course, many more poems written, so please do go to the YouTube channel and have a look and maybe comment on them. Thank you, Linda. Linda reads every poem and then has the very hard job of whittling them down to a few favourites. So here we are, Linda's chosen poems for February 2022. Plucking the strings of exuberance, rhythmic heartbeats. Paul Callis. Into the stars, pouring their hearts, relief for the day. Ratamani Sama. Dusky road near the city gates, a clamour of music. Ash Evan Lippert. Capturing the sunset. Crows. Keith Evetts. Speaker's Corner, a gang of young guns string a song. Robert Kingston. Robert, that took me back to my teenage years. I think it was Wham, wasn't it? That had a song, Young Guns Go For It. Now let's hear your colour poetry. I was truly gobsmacked when I read through the submissions. It was a bumper month, not just in quality, but in numbers. So my sincere thanks to Vandana Parashar, Lorraine Padden, James Young, Robert Horrobin and Ron Craig for giving up some of their valuable spare time to work on the editing team. It was a veritable kaleidoscope. Initially, brown was my favourite. Who knew? But in the end, it was like being a kid again and chasing rainbows. Every colour was splendid. So thank you for submitting your work. Shall we find out who the first nomination is? So I'm very pleased to welcome a new voice to the podcast, Karen Harvey, another one of our lovely Welsh poets who love the sea. Welcome, Karen.
Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It was a pleasure. We had a few technical difficulties along the way, Karen, but thank you very much for persevering and making it to the finish line. So tell me, which of the poems did you choose and why?
Ripe berries, the purpling of her fingertips. Ripe berries, the purpling of her fingertips. Kim Clew. On first appearance, it seems like a very simple haiku. It's just 7 words, but I felt there was a lot more to it. Someone who was only identified as her is picking ripe berries from a hedgerow, perhaps a garden. Can we see it in our mind's eye? Can you see those beautiful ripe berries, possibly blackberries, just right for the picking? Perhaps they were difficult to reach. There may have been thorns to negotiate. Now our hands are becoming stained by the juice oozing from the berries. I love the word purpling here. Purpling, not just purple, suggesting the gradual deepening of the pigment, starting out as just a blue tinge on the first touch, turning darker as more berries were gathered. Are the hands that are picking them, placing them into a receptacle to take home for later? Or as I imagine, she's popping them in her mouth and savouring that delightful flavour. This poem evokes so many of the senses, the sight, smell, touch, and the taste of summertime. I also like the way that the poem is laid out on the white space. The ellipsis, to me, depicts more than a pause, a break, because there's so many ways to indicate that. But it reminds me of a row of berries along the branch, just waiting to be picked.
Did you say, Karen, that there was a poem that it reminded you of?
Yes, it made me reminisce about a poem called From Blossoms by Lai Young Lee, who was born in Indonesia to Chinese parents. His poem From Blossoms is a longer poem, and it's singing the delights of eating a ripe peach, and it again has a very human story to it.
Yeah, if you could send me the link to that, then I will put it in the show notes, and people can make the association themselves.
Lovely, thank you.
And I have to say, Karen, I didn't pick up on the idea of the berries, of the ellipses and the berries on the branch when I was reading it. So I was really pleased that you pointed that out. And I just love it when you hear another poet talk about poetry. You so often find something that you didn't see in the poem yourself, don't you?
My first love was art before I started writing poetry, and I still dabble. So the place on the page, the surrounding white space, to me is very important. And although we don't know if the poet intended that effect, that's what I would do if I was writing that poem.
I think you've got another topic there for us, Karen. Thank you. I will get to it, not this year necessarily, but I will get to it. I tell you what else this poem made me think about. It made me think about specificity, because normally a poem, I think, works best if you're quite specific, quite focused in what you're talking about. But here, Kim has left us to choose what berry we want to imagine it to be. I went with blackberry, much like you, but I think she was right to do that, to leave it to us for 2 reasons. One, putting the color in, the blackberry color would have been too much for the poem and would have taken away from the purpling that you've spoken about. But also, it leaves us the opportunity to use our imagination and to finish the poem off as well. So I thought it was a lovely choice. Thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you.
Now let's continue with more colourful poetry. Purple crocuses. And that's all I remember. Tony Williams. She drops purple paint on watercolour paper. A wild crocus blooms. Laurie Kiefer. Birthday girl walks her purple bicycle to bed. Jeff Pope. Bluebirds in the pokeweed. Purple poop. Eve Castle. Grape clusters. The deeper purple of the old giraffe's tongue. Lisa Collins. Fields of purple. My tinnitus overshadows the bees. Reed Hepworth. Evening drizzle. Magenta neon lights on the asphalt. Daniela Miso. Patchwork Sky, All the Different Blues I Feel, by Sali Chatterjee Dutt. Favourite Jeans, The Many Shades of Blue Winter Sky, Christina Chin. Little Boy Blue, A Postpartum Pillow Bigger Than the Baby, Valentina Rinaldi Adams. Blue Days, Mam pours what ifs from her teapot, Adele Evershed. Mist Like Dawn, A Kingfisher's Bolt of Blue Jumpstarts My Heart, John Hawkhead. Morning Cold, A Blue Fox Watches Me from the Child's Bed, Alex Fife. Peeking through the blue door, that deep silence, Angela Terry. Blue Jay, An Orphan Child Finds Comfort in a Close-Knit Family, Paul Callis. Blue Snow, She Asks If the Night is Leaking, Sandra St. Laurent. On the sidewalk, a blue shovel lies in snow. No one around. Steve Ullum. Hydrangea. She knows her flowers, but not the word blue. Dorothy Burrows. Spring Morning. Potholes filled with blue sky. Liam Maguire. The American Dream. A soldier paints her toes ultramarine. M.R. Diefenbaugh. Winter Solstice. The printer runs low on cyan. Brad Bennett. Saturated Sky, Seeping into Inner Space, Beyond Indigo, Kim Russell. Slicing a Peach, The Colour of My Cancer Ribbon, Jason Furtak. Tangerine Sky, The Lingering Song of a Migratory Bird, Hifsa Ashraf. Lentil Curry, All Our Fingertips Stained with Turmeric, Joshua Gage. Orange Life Jackets Floating on the Calm Sea, Nothing Else, Natalia Kuznetsova. Midnight Sun, The New Bride in Orange Sindoor, Devashruti Mandal. Crimson Hat Bouncing Just Out of Reach in the Vast White, Sarah Mahina Cavello. Old Growth Forest Fluttering on Pin Oak's Scarlet Leaves, Doris Lynch. Her Rosy Cheeks in the Glow of a Bummed Cigarette, D.V. Rosic. Jumping Out of the Dark in a Lightning Flash, Red Roses, Charles Harmon. Red Dusk, The Smoothness of His Trigger Finger, Bruce H. Feingold. Together, Touched by Snow, Two Red Berries, Richa Sharma. At the Cemetery Gate, The Red in Her Eyes, Giddy Nielsen Sweep. She marks his poem with red ink, crushed rose petals. Sangeeta Kalarikal. A big red X on white paper, 3rd grade. Hildegard Bachmann. Clean sweep. The broom by the door reddens in her taillights. Robert Whitmer. This pearl alone on the russet lip of rock, days after rain. Deborah A. Bennett. Morning breeze. She turns her nose to the red roses. Bona M. Santos. I rue my red shirt. The bull's eye follows me. Tracy Davidson. Dragonfly, her blush getting redder by the minute. Joe Sebastian. Red roses in a litter bin. Passing train. Mira Rame. Pressed in my travel journal, one long red leaf. Kath Abella Wilson. Red spot. A girl paints adolescence. Rose. Outside my window already there are red leaves. First day of summer. Robert Beveridge. Tired of arguing, we contemplate the red harvest moon. Sarah Paris. Silent Lake, the marsh littered, shotgun shell red. Richard L. Matter. Morning fog. In the dim light, shiny red apples. Marie Morrissey Cummins. Even the shadows in a different shade. Crimson sunrise. Mirella Brelian. Before we go on to hear more scrumptious colours, let me just take a minute to say thank you for my coffees. It really does help with the cost of running the podcast. And there are so many things I have to pay for, like podcast hosting or the website, boring stuff like that. But the latest was my teleprompter, and I'm happy to tell you that I can now buy one. That's going to be a relief for my brain, I can tell you. So thank you for all the coffees you've bought me in January and February. Ian Speed, Sandra St. Laurent, Jason Furtak, Ron Craig, Sally Bigger, Linda Ludwig, Neera Kashyap, Eve Castle, Reed Hepworth, Anne Smith, Debbie Olson, and Ian Richardson. Really, that was terribly kind of you. I do appreciate it. Thank you. Let me dedicate the yellows to you. Even as leaves turn golden, the urge to dance in late summer rain. Wendy Gent. Ginkgo reflect on these rocks. Golden bones. Ronald K. Craig. Gold bands fade into the paintwork. Autumn sunrise. Femi Akinyele. Call to prayer. Golden light vibrates off a gong. J. Friedenberg. Colour therapy. The bright yellow hello of a winter rose. Mimi Ahern. A yellow leaf through the lamplight. Late for dinner. Tyler McIntosh. Yellow pants and shirt. She looks like a banana. Dad's in the Doghouse. Loretta Potts. Yellow gourds. The sun shines in my neighbour's garden. Mona Beddy. Sipping turmeric tea. Grey curtains catch the wind. Erica E. Benson. Twilight Lane. Each corner glows with yellow crocus. Marilyn Ward. Picking up a yellowed paperback. Aspen Trees. Marielle Herbert. Sunflower Field. Cars stopping for selfies with yellow blooms. Rob McKinnon. Evening Market. The green papaya now has shades of yellow. Minal Sarosh. Page by page, the green river darkening, imperceptibly. Ash Evan Lippert. Footsteps in the snow. Green shoots. Paul Miller. Spring green, you discover my bare breasts again. Isabella Kramer. Green meadow wrapped in the wind, dandelion. Angiola Inglese. Safari tents hug white-capped Kilimanjaro's jade fat hips. Dennis Maulsby. Greening fields, a 4-lane highway, narrows to 2. Richard Tice. Winter rain, my fingers brush the greener moss. Keith Evitts. Green grass, some would say, I'm better off here. Robert Kingston. A green depth to the glen's fragrance. Marsh mist. Christopher Chupp. At summer's end, green tomatoes. Heating the frying pan. Kathleen Tice. Dawn chorus. The green held within birdsong. Joanna Ashwell. More green or more blue, the pool water merges with his eyes. Nadia Kostadinova. Some wishes remain evergreen. C.X. Turner. Tomato plant, green on green, the hornworm. Krista Pandy. Green, and the engine blades between. Jack Galmitz. First light, I sip birdsong with green tea. Nina Singh. Neon flickers off the Scotch bottle. Green Book. John S. Green. Now, this poem generated a bit of discussion in the editing team. It's a response to the film Green Book, which, if you haven't seen it, I would recommend. John said that he felt a need to point out the fact that this man, of whom he's talking, had challenges beyond racial prejudice. He was gay and drank in excess. The neon light reflected off the Scotch bottle creates a multicoloured rainbow-like image that offers up the depth of this man's personal human condition. Let's hear it again. Neon flickers off the Scotch bottle. Green Book. Now we come to the second of our nominations for the Judge's Choice. This time introduced by another newbie to the podcast, Diana Salusia. Now, Diana lives in California, but I know you have British ties. What's your connection to Harrogate in North Yorkshire, Diana?
Oh, thank you so much for asking and remembering. That's where I grew up and went to school, and my parents still live there. I have a parent from each continent, each country, California and England. And so I go back frequently. It's been a little bit less frequent during COVID, but yes. And it's a town of flowers, actually. It's known for its flowers. And so often I think about the flowers that I grew up seeing there when I read haiku and poetry about flowers.
I am familiar with Yorkshire. I have my in-laws live there. But like you, I haven't been back for a while. You just couldn't get in for a while. But hopefully this year I'll get back, and maybe when I'm over there, I'll nip up and have a look around Harrogate. It's a beautiful, I believe it's a very beautiful sort of Regency town as well.
It is, yes. It's very famous for its Roman baths and architecture, and it really is, internationally renowned for its horticulture and flowers. And it took me a long time to recognize the connection with Japan and haiku, because there's a very huge, beautiful plantation of cherry trees that, of course, all bloom in spring, and visitors and families with Japanese connections and interests, come from all over England and Europe to visit it, because it is very, very famous. It's a long walk through the flowering cherry trees.
So, Diana, which poem did you choose?
Well, speaking of flowers, I did choose one featuring flowers. I chose the poem by Kristen Lindquist, Windflowers. Silver strands spring loose from her chignon. Windflowers. Silver strands spring loose from her chignon. My attention was captured by the artistry of the single word comprising this poem's first line, windflowers. Its creativity is compelling, drawing the reader in, asking you to conjure up your own visions of what windflowers are or might be. With just this single word, movement is introduced into the poem, and the poem is infused with color, for we cannot help but see and feel color when we hear and read the word flowers. I found myself imagining gently swirling flowers and blossoms caught up in a gust of wind, their colors faint but glowing. There's an elusiveness and a delicacy about them and their colors, partly because their colors are unnamed and unknown, but also because the reader is aware of the magic held here by windflowers always being uniquely imagined by each unique reader. But while the windflowers are the first things we see in this poem, vying for our attention is the presence of the person near them or among them, with her windblown hair escaping from its chignon, or bun. The silver strands bring a lingering luminescence. This color word, silver, and the contrast it brought in even offered to me that this was twilight during light spring winds. The choice of the verb spring in the second line conveys the continuation of movement and holds the layered potential of maybe doubling as a kigo, or a seasonal word. And spring is very much the season of flowers. There's a lovely sense of flow and flowing, the suggestion that her strands of hair, now blowing loose, are joining with the flowers in this dance on the wind. There's a quietness that allows us to be transfixed more by the color than by any sounds described, but sound is subtly present too. Throughout, Kristen uses repeating sibilants, the S and sh sounds, to bring to our ears the gentle sounds of the wind. I read this many times, and because of how open to imaginative interpretation it is, I look forward to sharing it with friends to hear what visions and colors it conjures up for them.
Thanks, Diana. Diana, I have to tell you, I was very happy you chose this poem for a couple of reasons. The first one is it gives me an opportunity to tell people that there's a new Poetry Pea podcast, Poetry Pea Readings, which will be out on the website and YouTube on the 25th of March, a once a month podcast, always on the last Wednesday. And it's kicking off with Kristen Lindquist reading to us from It Always Comes Back. And of course, she's having a chat. And I'll mail everybody to let them know when it's published, but please do make sure you're signed up to the mailing on the website. It's very easy to do. And the other reason I was happy that you chose this one was that it gave me well, actually there are three reasons, so I'll do the next one. It gave me an opportunity to talk a little bit about disjunction in our poetry. I don't know about you, Diana, but when you read this one, did you automatically think windflowers, or did you go with wildflowers?
I think that was what was so fascinating to me about the poem, and I don't feel like I could completely explore that in sort of the 350 word limit we had. But
yeah, sorry about that.
I loved the amalgamation of the two, because I sort of felt like even the optical illusion of wild and wind looking so similar to one another, right? And I guess it's a portmanteau, right? It's two words combined to make one. So you sort of see flowers that are wild in the wind, as you look at that word all together at once. And I have a little addendum like Karen. It reminded me of another poem that I could talk about, which is not a haiku, but from Yoko Ono, technically a word painting called Painting for the Wind. And I can link that. Was the first poem I ever read that really made me connect truly with haiku, and how you use a force and one kind of artistic element to create another. So, painting through words, and the idea that the wind is creating the art here, kind of independent of the observer and the artist. So I thought that was a really beautiful way that Kristen kind of played with those ideas too. And it was a little reminiscent of Yoko Ono's poem and painting, technically.
Coincidentally, Yoko Ono has an exhibition of her work on in Zurich at the moment. So I've been planning to go and see it. Maybe that's part of the exhibition. You never know. So windflowers, wildflowers. I did give me a jolt at the beginning. And I said to Kristen, and this is the third reason I was glad you read it out, that I was going to have to do so many takes to get this one right, because I was always going to read wildflowers at the beginning. But then I got thinking about it. And I think this is the joy of what Kristen's done here. Did she mean windflowers? Did she mean wildflowers? And I thought, well, Kristen knows her stuff. So she probably actually did. And then it got me going to our great friend Google to figure out why she chose windflowers. And I discovered that windflowers is a name for anemones. And anemones, I don't know about where you all are, because Diana, it's probably different for you in California, but certainly here in Switzerland, anemones would be a spring or an autumn flower. But I think because of the spring in the second line, I think she would definitely use that as a kigo.
That's so interesting, because one thing I did not do was I sort of deliberately decided not to Google windflowers because I sort of wanted to preserve a little bit my own. No, I think it's really interesting. I sort of thought are they a flower? And then I just thought I would rather kind of preserve my initial image of it a little bit. And then, but I'm also so glad to kind of hear that part, because like you said, when you hear somebody else's journey through a poem, you learn things that you hadn't seen or didn't hear or didn't see, so that's really interesting. And to me, anemones are always, I'm not a gardener, anemones are always marine because I live on the Central Coast. So it's a really interesting play of wind, flowers, tides. Anyway.
That's an interesting one, because Kristen lives close to the coast too, other side of the country. Maybe there's a connection with that too. Okay, Kristen, if you're listening, we need more information. Cool. Thank you very much, Diana. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic, Diana. Thank you. The silver shimmer of sweet bay magnolia leaves. Moving day. Matt Snyder. A silver line. What is within flows outside. Amrutha Prabhu. Silverfish shadowing my shadow. Herb Tate. Sea smoke rises from icy harbour. I sip Earl Grey. Pam Joy. Old wound. A grey moon on a frozen pond. Near a Kashap. Morning grayscale, the time between the last dark and First Light. Steve Barr. Grey clouds, reeling in the kite, and my son. Anne Alexander. Shadows creep along, grey fog ribbons undulate, dying darkness bleeds light. Wayne Kingston. Desolate winter, the grey voice of a titmouse. Jackie Chow. 7 Shades of Grey, the rainbow in monochrome. Ravi Kiran. Cold grey tiles swallow the grief. Elancharan Gunasakaran. Leaden mood, a sea of white gulls lifts the sky. Claire Ninham. Spring sky, cleaning the brushes from black ink. Malgorzata Formanowska. Ice storm, the black cat's feet never touch the ground. Joshua Sinclair. Blackened snow, his bedroom walls full of rainbows. Jonathan Roman. Fresh snow, the minx tracks end at a ring of black water. Sally Bigger. Black-capped chickadee, D, D, D. Nicole Tilde. Black cherry dewdrop, full of sky. Craig Kittner. Phone screen, a winter fly turns back to black. Anne Smith. Suma-e workshop. Black is not always just black. Anna Maria Domberg San Cristoforo. Pink-edged clouds. The last crow shepherds the others home. Mike Gallagher. Tangled gossip. Under a pink moon, spider lilies bloom. Anna Yin. A pink Easter egg exposed. Winter garden. Laurie Beckerer. The sad girl wearing pink. Wet hair. Erin Castaldi. First date. The lingering scent of pink lilacs. Debbie Olson. Mastectomy. One after another, the pink roses dry. Milan Rajkumar. In a paper bag, her flower sprouts. Pink hyacinth. Soretta Martin. Kaleidoscope, triple rainbow, all the way. Richard Bailey. Drive-through car wash, drifting, rainbow, foam. Alison Douglas Turner. And Here Comes Brown. I was very surprised at just how expressive it can be, and not always in the downbeat, yucky way I was expecting. Iris Garden. The chocolate brown's his favourite. E.L. Blizzard. Brown birds. Here comes what's his name. Ken Slaughter. As if no big deal, our kids call us brown parents. Vandana Parashar. Little brown bird hops onto my patio, alone no longer. Eavonka Ettinger. At breakfast, burnt brown toast, Aunt Ethel's hair. Joan Fingan. His gift jettisoned, wooden jewel box brown in backyard. Radhamani Sama. Brown leaves, fluttering among the sparrows. Alison Whipple. All night snow, the sheer whiteness of silence. Arvinder Kaur. Moving day, the flamingo faded white. P.H. Fisher. Now this next one, you really need to go to the show notes to have a look at to get the full effect. I'll do my best, but really you need to see it. Down a white wall, fire ants draw the line. Christopher Pays. Making my long story short, white wisteria. Alvin B. Cruz. Snowdrops so much whiter, his memories. Samo Kreutz. White sky, seagulls float on airwaves. Frosty morning. Catherine E. Winnick. Crayons shavings on the white canvas. My kaleidoscope. Lakshmi Iyer. Waterfall. White noise enters my tent. Carol Judkins. Forest awash in shades of white, stretching out the moon. Douglas J. Lanzo. An arc of white flowers, yucca after rain. Christine Wenck Harrison. White bluebells, blue bluebells. What was the question? Mark Gilbert. Today we'll finish with Matt Snyder's choice. I always have to be very careful how I say Matt's surname because I always want to do it the German way. So Matt's an old hand here on the podcast, and it's lovely to have you back.
It's so good to be back. Thank you for having me.
Matt, if I remember rightly, you started life in Indiana, and last time you were on the podcast, you'd made it across to Washington, D.C. Is that still the case?
Not the case. We moved a few months ago, actually, to a small town called Hillsborough in North Carolina. It's near the Research Triangle. It's on the Eno River. Very artistic and active little town.
But I believe North Carolina is, as a creative place, is quite a cool place to be.
Absolutely. Land of the Pines. One thing that's very delightful, there's along the river, we have the River Walk. It's a wonderful place to go for, no surprise, a walk. But it is part of the Mountain to Sea Trail Network. You can walk out to the River Walk and turn right and walk to the mountains, or turn left and walk to the ocean. Both are several hundred miles away, but it is an incredible trail network to have access to.
I have to do a road trip. That's just the long and the short of it. I have to come over and see it. I'll bring my bike. Maybe that will work too.
Perfect.
Matt, tell me, what poem have you chosen and why?
Okay. Crescent moon, her white nightdress, filling the missing part. Crescent moon, her white nightdress, filling the missing part. Poems by Cristina Povero. And part of what drew me to her poem was the sense of mystery and the many possible interpretations. Certainly the moon lends itself to that. I read and reread her poem, and it was a real journey of discovery, and I'll be happy to hear other interpretations as well. So you have the moon, and then in the second line, I'm struck by the intimacy in the poem. I saw her white nightdress through the narrator's eyes, an intimate partner, I assumed, and in the light of the moon, it became very soft and intimate for me. And then I come to the third line and the mystery of filling the missing part. And I ask myself the obvious question, what is missing? And I find myself in Christina's poem really naturally looped right around to the beginning. And I start encountering all kinds of new things in the poem. So on the second time through, I see not the crescent of the moon, but what's on the inside. And then I come to the middle line, and I think here there's a really neat visual connection between the roundness of the moon and the part that's missing, and the white nightdress, which I saw on her belly. And so as seen through that soft, intimate gaze, I took away that she was pregnant. And the narrator is sitting there just kind of reveling in the significance of that for their life. And all of that is painted. It's a soft white of the moon, and the nightdress is kind of hopeful and innocent in its whiteness. So for me, that just kind of helped tie it all together and made it more intimate and more mysterious. And there's just what's going to come next. It's so hopeful.
Okay, Matt, I think I told you I was very interested to hear your take on this poem. And I wondered, are you a glass half full person?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Because I think I'm the other way around. Because when I read this one, I found it a really sad poem. For me, the crescent moon, the waning moon, I think you said the moon is darker as it wanes. And that set the tone of the poem for me. And in my head, she and her partner, because I agree with you, it's a very intimate poem. They're in a room together and the worst thing has happened. And we're seeing the aftermath of a miscarriage. And when I read it, I felt like she was feeling really hollowed out, as she might be in those sort of circumstances. And it might feel like her womb has been scooped out and her white nightdress is filling that space, because nothing else can. And I agree that white adds to the poem, even in my version. So you've got a white, ghostly, sort of virginal story in my head. And yeah, white really works for it. And I think in this poem, just like in Kim's and Kristin's poem, we see an important part that our reader plays in the poem. You've got your version, which I have to say I much prefer to mine. I've got my sad version. So shall we open it up to our other two judges and say, what were you thinking when you read this one? Which side, or do you have a different story? Karen, do you want to go first?
Yes, I've got a slightly different take on it, and it's the sad take. Okay. I thought of the curve under the white nightdress, that perhaps she'd had a mastectomy, that her breast was removed, and where the curve of her breast had been, there under the dim light, her partner, long-time lover, could see that there was no longer that curve there anymore.
Oh goodness. Okay, so we've got two.
Is that deep?
two sad versions. Please, Diana, please tell me you've got something happy to say.
Well, I'm just intrigued because I don't think I read all of that into it. I think I just had a very much more literal take of sometimes how you look at things. Your eye, completes the pieces that are missing, or that play between, close perspective and far, and just, kind of the continued luminescence or sort of, ghostliness of a very translucent white night dress, and a very far away translucent crescent moon. So I'm really intrigued to hear all of these pieces of kind of loss and pregnancy and plentifulness and grief kind of coming into it. That's really interesting.
That's the joy of talking to people about it, isn't it, really? If joy is the right word. I think, Matt, we'll stick with your version because it's so much more hopeful than Karen and I. So thank you very much to the three of you, to Diana, to Karen, and to Matt, for coming along today and giving us your time and your brain power and giving us your analyses of the 3 poems. So I'm going to turn off the recording now, and the 4 of us are going to have a chat and possibly a fight about who wins the judge's choice and the honourable mentions. Thank you very much. So there we have it. I really, really enjoyed Colour. And judging by the quality of the work, most of you did too, with a few exceptions, I know. But either way, the challenge was met with great aplomb. Next time on the Haiku Pea Podcast, we'll be joined by Debbie Kalogi for a simply super sci-fi presentation. Until then, you've lots to do. Get writing your Kerouac submissions. You can write them in a contemporary style, but why not have a go at writing as Jack would have done, with his punctuation and his capitalization. If you need help, don't forget there are show notes on episode S5E6. Stanford did a grand job for us. Do go and soak it all up. You do have a few days to get your Haibun to us for consideration for the journal. Don't forget, Kristen Lindquist will be giving a reading of It Always Comes Back in a new podcast on the 25th of March. You'll find it on the website. Do come along and have a listen. It was great fun. And finally, do you think you could go to Apple, Spotify, Podbean, or wherever you get your podcast and give us a rating? I'd love to know what you think, and other people will too. Thank you all very much for coming along and listening, for taking part, for being community judges, for volunteering for other things. And do keep writing. Don't forget there's lots in the show notes for you to have a look at. If I've forgotten anything, which is more than possible, let's face it, email me and I'll sort it out. Ciao!